Take me inside what seems like was a fickle but basically loyal part of Trump's constituency, the business community. Someone told me today that they're so beyond this debate that Kudlow seemed to treat as an active debate. Conferences have already been canceled, and the debate now inside most large companies is whether people should telecommute or still come into their offices.
Nicolle, there is a complete divide. This is the first time we have seen global business leaders who were happy to take the tax cut because it worked for them leave the president, and I assure you he's not happy about it, but they don't have anyone to trust. And if you look back in times of crisis, whether you're talking SARS, Ebola, or the financial crisis, you would have business leaders and government leaders in a room saying, how are we going to solve for this? Tell me, who are the grown-ups in the room right now that can make that phone call to leaders? It was Larry Kudlow days ago saying, buy the dip, okay? Absolutely inappropriate today, saying this is just seasonal. And we know that even this morning when the president said it's going to be great for American business because people are going to go on vacation here. Really? Tell an airline that. 2 days ago, Mike Pence had to solve a rift between airline CEOs and the White House because they were debating over passenger data. Without credible sources inside the White House, corporate America, the Business Roundtable now has a corona task force because they're working with one another because they have no one to trust.
Someone likened this to, after 9/11, like you're saying, there were people to call, that the economy was paralyzed for days, weeks, months, and years in some sectors. But at least there was a line of communication. What does that look like? If you wanted to call, if you're Nick Callio and you run the trade association that represents the airlines, who do you call?
There isn't someone. Yes, CEOs are willing to do a workforce development bonanza with Ivanka Trump. Angela Merkel and Christine Lagarde will sit on a stage with her. But this is serious business. And this isn't just will a company cancel a conference or not. The people who are going to be disproportionately hurt the most is the working poor. It's easy to say let's cancel school for a few weeks because it's a safety precaution. What happens if you're one of the millions of American kids who get their only good meal, the free breakfast and lunch, and the after-school care? All of this matters. And if you're part of the gig economy, if you're a shift worker, what if you're being paid off the grid? We already knew millions of Americans didn't have $400 in case of an emergency. That emergency is now. It's not just about the market being in the red or green.
You know, Rick, I want to read you something that Austin Goolsbee wrote today. He was on our show last week and alluded to this, but I think that there's more information and there's more anxiety. He wrote this: a broad outbreak of the disease could be even worse. This is about why our economy is more vulnerable than China's. A broad outbreak of the disease could be even worse than the economies in China. That's because face-to-face service industries, the kind of businesses that go into a tailspin when fearful people withdraw from one another, tend to dominate economies in high-income countries more than they do in China. If people stay home from school, as Steph's saying, stop traveling and don't go to sporting events, the gym, the dentist, the economic consequence could be even worse. I'm thinking of the small business owner that has a deli next to a big business, or the after-school program that teach ballet lessons or baseball lessons. I mean, these really are the most vulnerable actors in the economy.
I mean, you can't telecommute to a deli, right? You have to be there to make
or class.
And I thought what was so smart about his piece was that China is a supply economy. They're building things and they're exporting it. We're a demand consumer economy, which is about face-to-face. Talked about sports events, travel, conferences, et cetera. When those are canceled, that so damages our economy, right? And then it also then diminishes the demand, so people are not buying things, they're not doing things. Our economy is 70% consumer spending, right?
That's been the growth in the last 3 years has been all about consumer spending. Companies have not been more profitable. It's the consumer. Consumers have lost their confidence, and we are telling them, stay home, tighten up.
But I have to say, I mean, going from epidemiological science to social science, Daniel Kahneman said the problem with the human mind is that we imagine possibilities, not probabilities. What we're doing now is imagining all these catastrophic possibilities, but the probabilities are different. And I think we have to have, one of the things government can do is to say, like President Obama used to do, like, let's just go, here's the worst case scenario, here's a medium case scenario, I have a bunch of experts, let's lay this out. That's not what the Trump people are doing. They should be able to be much more realistic about it.
But, Richard, if there's no one for you to trust, if you can't trust the White House, then aren't you going to go with the worst case scenario? You're the CEO of a company. You don't want lives on on your hands.
Well, and not just the CEO of the company, but if you're the consumer, I mean, I think if President Obama or George W. Bush after 9/11 and Bill Clinton kind of stood shoulder to shoulder with their FEMA director or with their Secretary of Homeland Security and said, we've got this, people were still scared, but there was a different kind of, government didn't have this very blatant sort of partisanship branded on it in the way it does now. I mean, Trump has ushered in an era of not making any secret about only directing a government for his base.
Right. So there's a sense in which we've experienced norm erosion. There's a sense in which we've experienced the institutional instability of the infrastructure of American democracy, the lack of trust in whether or not government works. And all of it has been in the service of one claim. You know, everything stops with me, Donald Trump. I am the state, right, to make that an equivalence. And at the same time, what we see as a consequence of that is just simply a lack of confidence. So to move from the possible to the probable involves information that allows you to kind of make reasoned decisions, to draw reasonable conclusions. When you don't have information, you just simply imagine the possible. Oh, my God, we're in the zombie apocalypse, right? This is the night of the living dead or something like that. So you get folks, I just dated myself, you get folks who are always, you know, so right now, my mother-in-law, your family members, they're imagining the worst scenarios possible. So everything's locking up. But I want to emphasize something that Stephanie said. We've been having a debate in our politics about what kind of country we are, right? The richest country in the history of the world. What will be revealed in this moment is the precarity of the most vulnerable among us. I'm talking about the janitors. I'm talking about all of those contract workers. I'm talking about all of those folks who are living not just simply paycheck to paycheck, but are not living from paycheck to paycheck, trying to figure out how to make ends meet. And when the medicine comes, when the health care services come,
when the subway shuts down, when the buses stop running, when you stop feeling safe putting your kid on a bus to go to school so you can go, you know, clean houses or
absolutely.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.